Hey, at least we're out of that creepy dungeon. Look, the sunny day and a nice fountain and... Wait, what's that noise? No. Why are there so many of them? Who even designs these encounters? Welcome back, everyone. We're back for round 2 of our GM-facing series of videos on running Pathfinder 2e on Foundry VTT. Last time, we took a tour through the NPC sheet, and now we're going to actually be using it. That's right, this is the Running Combats video. Let's get right to it. All combats begin with rolling for initiative. Now, there are a couple ways to do that, and I go over them in my Playing Pathfinder 2e video, and all of those work for the GM as well. However, as the GM, you do run into some situations not covered in that video. The first one is that you're usually rolling initiative for more than one creature at a time, and you'd ideally want to be able to do all of those rolls quickly, instead of rolling from each character sheet or clicking this dice icon repeatedly. So you can do it in a single click by just going to the combat tab, going to the top left and clicking on this roll NPCs button. It looks like a group of people with a little gear next to it. So that should roll for all of your NPCs while leaving the PC actors untouched, and therefore they can roll their own initiative. If you do happen to want to roll for all of the tokens in the scene, PCs included, the icon right next to it that just looks like a bunch of people will roll for all individuals in the combat. As a note, you'll notice that I clicked that after rolling for all of the NPCs, and it didn't re-roll my NPCs. It just rolled the one person who hadn't yet rolled initiative. As a note, each creature that is hidden automatically rolls its initiative privately, just to you, which is neat. And it is also hidden on the initiative tracker. You can see it's grayed out here. If you want to have all your initiatives secret, you just need to remember to set the roll mode down here to self-roll before you actually click the roll button on the combat tracker. You can roll a non-perception initiative for monsters the same way as for PCs, by selecting it in the drop-down menu on the sheet, or by rolling skill checks for each of them and setting it as their initiative using this handy little button. There are a couple of very useful macros in the PF2E macro compendium that can help with mass rolling skill checks. The macros can be found here. If you navigate to the compendium tab, that's the second icon from the right. Open PF2E macros, here they are. Notably, I'm looking for perception for selected tokens and stealth for selected tokens. And stealth is probably the second most common skill to use for initiative because of ambushes and that kind of thing. So I can just drag that over to my macro bar for easy access, so I don't need to keep opening the compendium to access that macro. And so I've reset initiative here, and this is the creature that I rolled the acrobatics for as a demonstration. But if I select the rest of them and I click the stealth for selected tokens, it rolls stealth for them. It doesn't automatically add that to the initiative, but simply by clicking this button, as we've seen before, I can set all of those initiatives to be what I want them to be. Another way you can do basically the same problem is, let me just reset initiative again quickly. I have a bunch of giant rats here and I have 2 rat swarms. So if I know that they're all going to be rolling stealth for initiative, I can open the parent actor sheet from the actor tab. So that is not by double clicking on the token, but by navigating to the specific creature under the actors tab. And if I change the skill on the drop down here, say to stealth, you'll notice if I check the individual token instances of that actor, they have also been changed to stealth. They will automatically follow what is in the parent actors sheet. And this is super useful because it means when I do click, for example, the roll NPCs button, you will see that the 3 giant rats rolled stealth for initiative because that's what they've been set to do in their sheet. And I only need to do that with 1 or 2 clicks from the actors tab instead of going into each and every token and changing the drop-down menu selection. You can also update initiative for any participant by right-clicking their name in the initiative tracker, clicking Update Participant, and then changing the initiative value to whatever the correct value is. You can also drag participants around if their initiative changes, such as, for example, if they're delaying or if a PC is knocked out by a creature and their initiative automatically moves to before the creature. Okay, next we're going to talk about some stuff that's maybe a bit more Foundry general, but they're still useful tools while running PF2E, and frankly, they're things that I didn't immediately know about. So the first one is simply popping the combat tab out so you can simultaneously keep an eye on both chat and combat. You can do this by right-clicking the tab icon. There we go. You can actually do this for any of the tabs, for example, scenes or actors or items. Another use I found for it apart from combat is that if you have a ton of items in one particular folder, like if this took up the entire tab, for instance, and you wanted to move a bunch of items into another folder, instead of having to scroll all the way up this list, you can just pop out another actors tab and very easily drag from one folder to another like that. Okay, the second thing I'd like to show you is unlinking initiative from a specific scene. So by default, you'll only see and be able to interact with the initiative tracker for an encounter on the scene where you started that encounter. So this works fine for most cases, but sometimes you have a combat that spans multiple scenes. Maybe because one side is chasing the other or trying to retreat, or magical shenanigans result in teleportation and stuff like that. So as you can see at the moment in this adjoining map, there is no combat encounter active. However, what I can do is click this little button on the top right of the combat tracker, Unlinking Initiative. If I do that and I go to the other scene, the initiative remains the same and I can track it across multiple maps. So, for example, if some PCs are still in the city square while some have fled into the city streets and are being pursued, you can actually manage that all with just one initiative tracker, and that can be super useful. Finally, a brief mention of the other stuff here. So if I click on the gear icon, you can see that you can set a tracked resource. You have to choose from a preset list of characteristics, but some of them can be pretty useful, like tracking speed or hero points. There's also the skip defeated checkbox, which basically, if ticked, means that when you begin the encounter and you're cycling through turns, if a creature is indicated as defeated, and I click next turn, it just skips over that creature. So it keeps combat moving a little bit faster. While we're talking about initiative and the combat tracker, I wanted to do a quick mention about the scouting effect. So scouting is an exploration activity that you can take in PF2E that provides the whole party with a +1 circumstance bonus to initiative. Now, instead of manually adjusting every PC when you roll, or every PC having to remember to add the +1 when they roll initiative, for example, by bringing up the menu as so, you can see that Samara actually has the scouting effect already active. And where I got that from is if I go to the Compendium tab again, and I want to search for other effects. So other effects is right here, and I can look for scouting. And I can just drag that onto whatever token needs it. For PCs, I strongly recommend that they drag it over to their macro bar, which then creates a toggleable macro. What that means is while selecting a token, if I click this macro, it removes scouting because Samara had it, and if she doesn't have it and I click it, it adds it. So the power of toggleable macros itself is huge. I strongly advise the PCs at my table to put down a toggleable macro for effects that are applied pretty constantly, such as one-round buffs, like Inspire Courage, or the cover effect is also very useful. Now we are into combat itself. So we covered simple things like moving, attacking, taking damage, placing templates, targeting, all that good stuff in our Playing Pathfinder 2e video. So definitely go check that out if you're unsure about the basics of combat in the system. I'm going to be focusing here on things the GM often has to deal with that players don't. So our first example is rolling saving throws and applying effects to a whole bunch of enemies at once. So let's say that Samara cast her Burning Hand spell. So I will place this cone, and lucky me, I get to target, if I place it just right, I get to target 3 enemies. So what I can do is I can just select all of the enemies affected by the spell and click the little button that popped up with Samara's casting. Okay, so we've got 2 failures and a success. So the first thing that's useful to know is that if I hover over a chat card in the chat bar, it actually highlights the token that it's attached to. Do you see that little red border surrounding the rat swarm? And you'll see that for each one. So I know exactly which token had that particular degree of success. Now that in itself is pretty useful, but wait for it, it gets better. So let Samara roll damage for her spell. And this would be revealed. I think I still have it set to self-roll. So 6 damage. So we know that the rat swarm and the giant rat take 6 damage, while the other giant rat takes 3. So I could obviously click on each individual token and click the buttons here. But what I can also do, and this is very useful when you have a lot of enemies that are hard to distinguish from each other, you can click the name tag on each chat card to select it. So I've selected the rat swarm now. I hold down shift and I select the giant rat name tag, and now both of these tokens are selected. I just identified them as those who failed, but it selects the appropriate token, and then I can click the damage. Voila. And the final one we know did a success. Actually, I can select it by the chat card again just to keep things consistent, and if I click half damage is applied. Another cool thing is that if Samara, for example, had cast, let's say that she'd cast Color Spray instead. So as we can see, Color Spray, the effects are conditions as opposed to damage. And if you select, let's just say, for the sake of argument, all 3 of these creatures succeeded, you can select all of them, right-click, and if you go to the condition manager and you select a condition, it'll actually apply to all of the selected tokens. So obviously that works equally well whether you select them by clicking and dragging or whether you're selecting them via chat card. So that's a handy way of distributing damage and saves for a large number of tokens at once. Now let's talk a bit about the inverse. So what if your monsters are doing something nasty to the PCs? So let's take a look at this rat swarm. If it bites you, it has a nasty ability called Filth Fever. So you can see that it has an attached saving throw. You can pop out this saving throw just by clicking this little chat icon. That tells the PCs nothing about what this ability is, any of the details about it, which might be metagamey. It just gives them a button to click for Fortitude. The PCs won't even see the DC. They will just see Fortitude save. So while selecting Samara, I can click on this to roll. And the advantage of rolling saves this way, as opposed to just asking the PCs to roll a non-specific Fortitude save, say from their sheet, is you'll notice that because I popped out this save from the Filth Fever ability block, it carries the traits of that ability. It carried the disease trait. So when Samara rolled her Fortitude save by clicking the button, the system knew that she was making a save against a disease, and therefore her +2 item bonus from an anti-plague applies. So if you get in the habit of constantly popping out your monster abilities using this pop-out function from the ability itself, it means that a lot of the situational modifiers your players may have will automatically get taken into consideration by the system because the traits are inherited into the saving throw. So it's a really great habit to get into. I find that it really reduces the mental weight of having to remember all of the situational stuff you have going on for each character. Now we're going to do one final note, which is just really a UI convenience thing. So a GM often has to deal with multiple enemies and sometimes enemies of different sizes. So for example, suppose this rat swarm was kind of swarming all over the place. Now, if it occupied these squares, I should say, it obscures the rat tokens. And I have it, it's kind of difficult to find the rat tokens underneath. Well, what you can do is you can hover over this stack of tokens and press the Z key. What this does is it cycles the tokens. So rat number 1 is now above the rat swarm, which is above rat number 2. But while hovering over the rat swarm, if I click Z again, it gets sent completely to the back. Both giant rat tokens are put in front of it, and both of them are accessible, despite them all inhabiting the same square. The most common way this arises is usually for swarms or troops or that kind of thing, but you might also find it happening with tiny creatures or very, very big creatures, gargantuan creatures, for instance. In any case, that's pretty much all I wanted to cover for this specific combat-based video. Hopefully, it helps your combats and your game as a whole run a little bit smoother. My next video will likely be focusing on either the homebrew aspects of GMing, how to make your own items, how to make it play nice with the system, a lot of the really cool tools that are available to the GM in PF2E to homebrew in this particular Foundry implementation. It might be that, or it could be loot management. So if you guys have a preference for which video you'd like to see next in the series, feel free to comment. Your comments have been very encouraging and super helpful so far, so I really look forward to reading them. And don't worry, I will definitely get to both videos. It's just a matter of which one comes first. In the meantime, though, I wish you happy pathfinding.